Your unique self is part of your natural innate being, as is your greatness. Sometimes it's been cultivated, sometimes it's something you came into the world with, but you have unique greatness. Once we start to allow that greatness, to allow ourselves to identify with it, it doesn't make us arrogant. It makes us able to recognize our worth.
Hello, dear ones. This is a special episode, a tribute to an incredible woman that was divine, love and joy and grace and playfulness embodied. On Monday, the 10th of July, Sally Kempton left her body. In the waning moon of Guru Purnima, which is the full moon, where we celebrate our teachers, where we celebrate the Guru within, and the Guru in those that have touched us the most, that touch us the most. Many of you will know Sally Kempton from this podcast. She has been on it a few times in different ways and also offered workshops and extra sessions supporting the different courses that we have been offering here, and is someone who was incredibly dear to me and that has had an enormous impact on my life and my offerings and my understanding of my Shakti, the power, the energy that I bring. One evening in the early 70s, while sitting in her Manhattan living room, Sally Kempton was overcome by a feeling of all-encompassing, unconditional love that seemed to come out of nowhere. She had never known that love like this was possible. The experience lasted for 24 hours and turned her life around. She has shared that she was on psychedelics during this experience, and yet she knew that it was real. She knew that it wasn't just an experience of being high, but an experience where the masks had come off and she was able to see that the truth is ecstasy. At the time, Sally had a flourishing career as a New York journalist, writing on popular culture, the arts, and feminist issues for Esquire, the New York Times, New York Magazine, and The Village Voice. An early voice in the second wave feminist movement, spirituality was the last thing on her agenda. She was a left-wing intellect. Her experience that night had affected her so powerfully that within a year, she'd given up her career and her life in New York to immerse herself fully as a student and teacher of spiritual awareness. 2 years later, she encountered her guru, the enlightened Siddha master, Swami Muktananda, and became his full-time student. An enlightened master in the Indian yoga tradition, Muktananda, who was alive from 1908 to 1982, was known for his ability to ignite the latent meditation energy, the kundalini, in others through a look or a touch. When Sally met him, he was traveling in the US, where he awakened thousands of people to their spiritual potential. In the moment that she saw him, she knew that he was her guru. To live this life with him, with the ashram, she had to cut off whole parts of herself, the bohemian, the rebellious, the intellectual, the ironic, radical. She studied and traveled with Muktananda from 1974 until his passing in 1982. She edited many of his books, received intensive training in the texts of Vedanta, yoga, and the Northern Indian tantric tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, and she taught courses around the world. In 1982, Muktananda initiated her into the traditional Saraswati order of Indian swamis or monks and gave her the name Swami Durgananda. For the next 20 years, she served as a teacher in the Siddha Yoga meditation community. She created and taught workshops, courses, and trainings in meditation and spiritual wisdom, served for a time as editor of the spiritual magazine Darshan, and wrote extensively on all aspects of spiritual life. Sally was a Swami here at the time when Muktananda left his body and when Guru Mai became the guru of this ashram. She says that what she learned is that the guru is not Baba, Swami Muktananda, or Guru Mai, but an energy that's present in the guru and lives in you as well. And that she realized that this was the second stage of the devotional path, when you realize that the energy is there when the guru isn't present and you internalize it more. In the final stage, you own it. In 2002, Sally was inspired to put aside her monastic identity to create a teaching path that could help students deal directly with the challenges of 21st century life. Her work this past 30 years interprets the wisdom of the Tantras for mature, contemporary aspirants, drawing on depth psychology and neuroscience, as well as the insights of integral philosopher Ken Wilber. Sally is the author of 2 hugely popular books, Meditation for the Love of It, which, if you have not read, will transform your relationship with meditation. In particular, taking you from this place of it being something that you have to do, that you want to do because it's good for you, into something that you have to do, that you want to do because it is everything, because it is love, because you love it. And her other famous book is Awakening Shakti, the transformative power of the goddesses of yoga, which is a beautiful and powerful book where she shares about the Mahavidyas, about the goddesses from the Hindu tradition, and the mythology, the mantras, the mudras, the images, the stories, and how to wake up the essences of these energies inside of you. I know that this book and these teachings have meant so much to so many of you, and that this book has been such a powerful vehicle in this world of a new wave of understanding these energies, particularly in the Western world, and understanding them as something that lives inside of us, that is there to be awakened, to be brought into this world, that these deep feminine powers are needed in this world and that we can each awaken them. She also has an audiobook which is called Doorways to the Infinite, the Art and Practice of Tantric Meditation, which is incredibly powerful and beautiful and has accompanied me through much time over the last decade. She taught meditation as a process of inner exploration in which we learn to integrate heart, mind, and body in order to experience our natural state of wisdom and love. Sally also offered a wide variety of classes on yogic wisdom texts, as well as hands-on contemplative practices for moving through psychological obstructions, understanding the intricacies of inner life, and how to apply spiritual principles to relationships, work, and life in our time. Many of these practices and teleclasses are available on her website, which is sallykempton.com. Though Sally offered many courses for beginning meditation students, she is also regarded as a teacher's teacher whose approach inspired long-term practitioners to free themselves from routine meditation practice and move deeper. It is remarkable to meet someone that has lived 3 so different chapters of life. The first out in the world as an activist, as an intellect, the second in the ashram, deep in devotion, surrendering, and allowing herself to really embody these energies. And then, of course, the last 30 years as a teacher, bringing the practices of Tantra, of Kashmir Shaivism into the world. And these practices are householder yogi practices. It is a path of living in this world with all that is here. And it is a wild path in these times, perhaps in all times. Many of the conversations that I had with Sally were around how wild the spiritual life is, how many different practices, teachers, lineages, modalities that are on offer these days, and how this is a time where so many of them are coming together, where so many of us are exposed to different paths, to different practices, and how different that was from her day. One of the things that I've observed in Sally was her desire to stay so connected to this world and to the people and the ideas that are of this time, and that she was always so interested in learning and curious to meet other people and find out what they were doing. I invited her onto the podcast very close to the beginning. I had already been studying with her for, I think, 5 years by then. I was so grateful that she came to London regularly and that I was able to sit with the cooler, with the community in these spaces of deep meditation when I found this whole world of what was formerly known as Anusara Yoga, and through Layla Sadeghi, who I was doing my teacher training with at the time. And this opened up a whole world of Sally Kempton and Sianna Sherman, Tara Judelle, whose voices you will all hear shortly. What an amazing community it was to be part of, and to get to sit in these deep, deep practices that were held with such joy, such lightness, and yet where so much moved inside of me. After Sally came on the podcast, she told me that she listened to it, and I couldn't really believe it, that somebody who was such a master in what she was offering would have time to listen to other work. And she wrote to me once and she said that she just found the podcast so interesting and mind expanding on so many levels. And it gave her such a hopeful sense of the creativity and caring and brilliance of my generation of dedicated activists and thinkers. And of course, the weaving with the sacred that ran through it. So you can listen to Sally in different episodes through the podcast. There's episode 8, which is about awakening our true blueprints within. And then you can find her in episode 92, where she shares some of her wisdom with 2 other elders, Jyoti and Matt McCartney. In episode 117, Sally actually becomes the host of the podcast, and we talk about intuition and how it is a compass for a beautiful future. And you can hear her voice woven into episode 161, From Me to We, a spirituality of wholeness, which was a beautiful course that she was part of last year with some other incredible people that have been part of this podcast. And for those that are members of All That We Are, there is a beautiful session with her and you can find it in the gifts section, and it's on uncertainty, impermanence, and deep practice for radical times. And it has some really beautiful practices around inner refuge. And if you have the From Me to We course, you can listen to Sally Kempton talking about karma and how we are all entangled in that module. And then in the Beautiful Leadership Immersion she shares on leading with soul, this masterclass I have taken some of and I'm sharing with you in this episode so you can hear what it is that she has to share around how we can live with soul, how we can embody our gifts in the world, how we can be activists of the sacred. And although this wasn't overtly in all of her teachings, it was so core to how she saw the world and what she was inspired by. And so I really hope that you receive something from that that takes you deeper into the possibility, the power, the joy, the presence that you are. There are so many things that I could share about Sally and what I learned from her. And there was a particular period of my life where I was going through a really difficult breakup, and then I was writing intuition, and my father was dying. And Sally was so present with me during that time. She read the book, she made her edit notes, she helped me refine the text that was on the back of the book. She helped me rename the podcast. She completely understood why I wanted it to have a new name. And she helped me have the most extraordinary experience of my dad's death. And some of that was from going on retreat with her in Assisi the year before, where death and dying was the theme, learning so much about death, which has been a deep, deep interest of mine. It's something that has come up a lot in my life, and as well as near-death experiences. And I felt that her teachings and her presence allowed me to experience that in a different way, and in a way of deep, deep grace. One of the things that I experienced with Sally was a complete radical acceptance of all of me, in particular, the difficulties that I often had with rooting the intense spiritual information that I was receiving, the intense energetic experiences, alongside so much psychic information, and then living here in late stage capitalism and trying to live a life of dating and making enough money to pay the bills and all of that. And sometimes it felt so messy. And in those moments, she really showed up for me. And there is a particular moment where I was staying with her in her house in California, and she was cooking dinner, and she invited me to go and sit at her altar and to seek sanctuary and refuge there. When I walked into the space of her altar and sat down, it felt like I was in one of the most powerful Shakti temples that I have ever been to. I felt the power and the depth of her practice and her love. And I know that this refuge, this wisdom, this willingness to talk about all of it and offer space that was both hysterical and empowering was something that so many received from Sally, that she was so generous in what she gave, and how unique it was to have somebody that had been in an ashram, that was a swami, that understood these teachings in every single cell of her being, and was a woman that was coming at it from this way that was not patriarchal, that understood what it was to be in a feminine body, that was able to open and touch all of her students in a way that was so deeply empowering. I was rereading our texts and emails, and I found this passage that she wrote to me in an email in relation to something that I was experiencing. It feels really important to share as we continue this path of awakening Shakti. She said, "We've had thousands of years of unquestioned patriarchy, in which the weapons of the feminine were withdrawal, silence, and hiding. In that mythic time, the forces of patriarchy were such that even an incarnation of the goddess had no choice but to leave the world in the face of such unthinking disrespect for the feminine. But it's not like that anymore. We are so fortunate now that we can make different choices than one form or another of self-sacrifice. And often that feminine urge to be a vessel, a muse, a lover to a powerful man is an old samskara that doesn't actually serve us. And sometimes life just busts us in the chops until out of the intensity of hurt, we are able to let those archetypes go. I can feel this radical imprint that knowing Sally has left with me, in me, as me. And I know that this is true for so many, and it is my deep honor to share with you now the voices of some of those that studied with Sally, that loved Sally. This includes Sianna Sherman, Tara Judelle, Layla Sadeghi, Susanna Harwood-Rubin, Pernilla Arvin Lupai, Emily Kusa, Charlotte Gallagher, Anne van der Waal, Patty Tenenbaum, and Anya Berge. And now, as we bless Sally, as we bless her life and everything that she gave us, for those that would like to, you can join in a mantra practice for these 30 days until the 23rd, where there'll be a gathering for Sally online, where you can chant the Maha Mrittyunjaya mantra every day. And Sianna shares this at the end of this episode. In the mythology, when Sati leaves her body is dropped on all of these different places on earth in India, and each of these sites becomes a temple, becomes a goddess temple. As we honor Sally and everything that she has given us, and even if this is your first meeting with her and something opens for you from these teachings, or you go away and listen to more, read her books, do her teleclasses, and get deeper connected to her, what I'm seeing is that, like Sati's body fell in these places, creating these Shakti peaks, these centers of Shakti part where you could feel this energy, that the Shakti that Sally has awakened, it is living in so many of us, in the hearts of us. And so as she leaves her body, I feel that this energy that has been cultivated in me and in all of us, it gets stronger as we are invited to fully own it in deep honoring and remembrance, in deep love. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community, or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. Welcome, Sally. Thank you for being here with us and coming to share your wisdom. I wondered if you could share with us what's alive for you around this question of the difference of leading from ego and leading from soul.
Yes. And I think for all of us, this is probably the question that once we become not only activists, but activists of the sacred, which is kind of more the way I would describe myself. The question of where you're sitting when you lead becomes more and more crucial. And I have come to define leadership first as self-leadership. In other words, as willingness to investigate your own motives, to clarify your own desires, to actually center yourself at different moments in your most authentic relationship to yourself, your desires, to presence itself, and to the people around you. And for me, this has been essentially a lifelong journey. And I believe that for most of us, it is a lifelong journey. And that the first thing we have to recognize is that we're in training, as leaders of soul, leaders from soul. Our lives become a training in actually discerning what it is in any moment to be in touch with soul and to be speaking, acting, being in our relationship to soul. I want to ask you all, I just want to put this thought in your mind because I would like you to share it at some point, which is to say, how do you experience your soul in action? When you're acting, when you're in activity, when when you have an inspiration to lead in some way or to express in some way, how do you experience your soul in those moments? And, one of the things that became very alive for me about 20 years ago was actually a definition that Carl Jung gave about the difference between what he and Jungians in general call the difference between soul and spirit. I'm a spiritual teacher primarily, and I'm kind of prejudiced in favor of spirit. That is, I spent many years cultivating spirit in the sense of, the great open spaciousness of consciousness and trying to stay in touch with that, with, the knower, the sense of pure being. And in that process, I discovered, and this is what often happens to spiritual people, especially spiritual people who see spirit as pure consciousness, not necessarily embodied, is that what actually happens when you make spirit your priority is that a lot of things get lost, one of which is the felt sense of embodiment. Another of which is the sense of your unique individual path, your unique individual contribution. So at a certain point, I became aware of another approach to personal action, which one of my teacher friends calls the unique self doctrine. And that understanding is that we have a uniqueness in our embodied being, which is not egoic. It is actually the expression of our soul's nature, definitely determined by our karma, definitely determined by the epigenetics of our particular ancestral lineage, but really the result of the evolutionary process that our soul has gone through for lifetimes, if you recognize reincarnation, and that we've come to this moment having acquired skills, having acquired different types of understanding, and having acquired wounds in the course of our process. So in learning to lead from soul, a lot of it is about learning to lead from the authenticity of yourself rather than from the wounds, the needs, the various ideas about reality that we have acquired from our family and the culture. Amisha and I did an interview about her new book on intuition. And, one of the really brilliant things about that book is that it offers principles for how we get in touch with our own intuition, which include things like stillness, openness, trust, all qualities that I think all of us know that we need to work on, that we actually need to cultivate. For most of us, these don't come with the original package. They need to be cultivated. So if we're talking about cultivating connection with our unique self, which I think is as good a paradigm as any for understanding soul leadership, what would be the ways that we know our unique self as opposed to our, the self we'd like to be, the self our parents told us we were, et cetera, et cetera. And discovering the qualities of your unique self really demands an enormous amount of self-inquiry. And some of it is inquiry into the qualities about yourself that you have a hard time with. For instance, one of the methods for discovering your unique self gifts is to ask yourself who you're jealous of. What I mean by that is that most of us, when we experience, and some of you may have never been jealous of anybody, so that may not be a methodology for you, but most of us have moments of excruciating jealousy. And almost always our jealousy is of people who are embodying gifts that we are not sure we embody. So this is an enormously helpful piece of information to begin to ask ourselves, okay, who am I really jealous of? Who was I jealous of when I was a child? Who have I been jealous of as I grew up? Who am I jealous of in my current work? And one of the things that you probably notice is that you're not jealous of people whose bodies, whose minds, whose activities are quite different from yours. In other words, I personally would never be jealous of a ballerina, because I say this as a person who studied dance and who loves to dance, but this is not where my self sense is located. I've never believed that, my mission in life is to be a dancer. So if you ask yourself, what is it that you're jealous of? You start to recognize what it is that matters to you, what your gifts are, and probably to see which of your gifts are not truly being expressed. And it may be surprising. That's one of the most interesting things about this process. It may be surprising. There are other qualities of the unique self paradigm, other ways in which you can begin to understand your unique self. One of them is to start to recognize your unique silliness, like your unique form of playfulness. What is it? What form of personal silliness do you express and experience that makes you feel comfortable, that makes you feel like yourself, that makes you feel happy, and that actually has absolutely nothing to do with your persona, with what you're willing to express publicly? Another way of discovering that your unique self quality is, what is your unique self obligation? And there may be more than one, aside from the obligations that we experience when we're around people who are suffering, or who need something from us, or who are family members whose presence asks us to be more generous, more caring than we might be with non-family members. So these are what I would call normal human obligations. But there are other deeper obligations. There are unique self obligations, or unique soul obligations. And of course, these include the obligations that you have to yourself, to your journey, but they also include the obligations that you have to those with whom alliance is necessary in order for your life purpose to be fully expressed. So what is your unique obligation? And another question to ask yourself, of course, is, what is your unique sense of purpose? What do you feel is your purpose? And in this particular paradigm, your purpose is always aligned to your gifts. When you're trying to discover your purpose and the type of activism that you're being called to, one of the questions to ask yourself is, what are my gifts? What am I good at? Another is, what is needed, and how can someone with my gifts make the offering of what is needed? And what do I love? What is going to make me happy? If you are going to really be leading from soul, you actually have to answer these questions. The question of what are my gifts, the honest question of what are my gifts, the question of what is needed, and the question of what makes me happy. And these are questions that you actually ask yourself to discover your unique dharma. The other quality of the unique self paradigm is that it goes along with the recognition that none of us have to be the sole hero in this journey, that we are actually part of a tapestry, that we're part of literally of a symphony, which, I mean, from one level, of course, most of us understand that this is a non-dual universe. In other words, that there is complete connection between every aspect of this universe. But here, what I'm talking about when I talk about unique self symphony is that in your chosen field or in your chosen family or in any situation in which you want to step up as a leader, including with yourself, what you're always doing and what the unique self teaching asks us to recognize that we are part of the symphony, that we play an instrument, but that there are other instruments being played. And I feel that the essence of soul leadership is relations between people who really understand their own unique gifts, their own unique obligations, their own unique purpose, and are engaged in a particular, in a journey to actualize it in the purest way possible. And also engaged in recognizing the journey of others and the ways in which our connections with each other and our merging and aligned purposes actually create a symphony in which everybody has an instrument to play. And some of us may be soloists for a brief while, but we actually cannot be soloists without the alignment with the others in the orchestra or even the quartet.
I wonder if you can share a little bit around karma and how that relates to purpose and finding one's gifts and actually being able to embody one's gifts.
Yeah. Do you want me to do the entire chapter and verse on karma? And I can do that. The doctrine of karma in Hinduism and Buddhism and in other Eastern traditions, there's a similar one in Taoism. I know there's one in Jainism, though I'm not that familiar with that tradition. It certainly exists in Kabbalistic Judaism. The Christians I think it was the Council of Oregon in the 5th century or the 4th century, decided that they would not support the doctrine of reincarnation. So now in the Christian tradition, everyone goes to heaven and there's no rebirth. So I'm not going to give you all the proofs of reincarnation that contemporary researchers have come up with, but let's just assume that what the teachings on karma say is that we don't just come into this life one time. The thing that has always helped me understand this process is the idea of justice, which I do believe is one of the first principles, that one of the major values of our lives as humans, as embodied souls. That there are qualities like justice, like love, like kindness, that are really principles of life. And we often see them being violated in our current society, both in the way our governments treat our citizens and in the way our citizens treat each other. And we often ask the question, so how come certain people just are absolute, horrible people and flourish and never seem to get any genuine pushback? And what the doctrine of karma and reincarnation says is that justice and growth do not always happen in this lifetime. That to understand this principle, we have to understand that we're engaged in a much longer trajectory than this life. I personally have found that very helpful and important to recognize that, okay, because I do live my life with the understanding that I'm in training, that there's no finish. There are certainly accomplishments and, there's aspects of our personal and spiritual growth and our growth in competence, our growth in relational capacities, etc., that we see ourselves transform and change in this lifetime. But there are certain qualities, developmental demands, spiritual demands, etc., that we do not accomplish in one lifetime. And that the need we have to grow, to transform, to become better people, to experience more skill, to have more experience, cannot be entirely fulfilled in this lifetime. So assuming that we've been here and we've been, back and forth here many, many times, we come into this life, and here I'm actually speaking from the descriptions of the sages, especially the Hindu and Buddhist sages. We come into this lifetime with a backpack of wounds, relationships, interpersonal tribes, and skills that we carry from other lifetimes. I was recently having a conversation with a spiritual teacher I know, and one of the things he said was that many of us here have had experiences of awakening, of just seeing through the veils around the world and around our lives. And these moments come in a flash and, actually can illuminate our entire life and can illuminate our sense of what matters in the world. But for most of us, they don't last. Those revelatory moments don't last. The people whom they do last for are people who have done an enormous amount of inner work over lifetimes. And so in this lifetime, they're in a position to actually hold on to their spiritual realization. And I would say that that is true in every area of life. So your karmic propensities have given you certain gifts, and they've given you certain, let's say, challenges. If we look at ourselves, we see what these are. For me, the major challenge of my lifetime has been, interpersonal. I had certain early childhood experiences that made relationships difficult for me. But as I matured, I realized that even the early childhood relationships were the expression of karmic tendencies. And in the same way, my talents, my skills, my interests, the basic ones were all expressions of karmic tendencies. So in the doctrines of karma that are discussed in Hinduism and Buddhism, this is from the Indian tradition, basically from the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which is, along with the Bhagavad Gita, the great source in the Indian tradition of understanding about karma. So it's said that we have essentially three types of karma: personal karma. We also have collective karma, which is what we all have to go through as a society. Our personal karma includes what's called our destined karma. That is the experiences and the tendencies that we came into this life with, which include who your parents are, what your body type is, certain diseases, and gifts, skills that that we're born with. And every one of you has certain gifts and skills that you were born with, some more than others. And then we have what is called the sanchita karma, or I call it the karmic backpack, which is to say the accumulation of old tendencies, of actions, of mental states that are not active now, but which become active at any time in the future. And if we, when you say to yourself, why did this horrible thing happen to this person? They were just, they just met the love of their life, and they were beginning to, to really be able to express themselves as a filmmaker or whatever it is. And all of a sudden they got stricken with multiple sclerosis or cancer, or their company folded. So those experiences where there's a kind of a force majeure that comes in and upends your life are very often not the result of something you did. Sometimes they are, but can be the result of something in your karmic backpack, something from another life that just kind of comes in from what feels like left field, but which is something that you had to live through because you were holding it in you, within your samskarik, your backpack of past impressions. So the third kind of karma, which is, in a certain sense, the most important, is called kriyaman, which literally means the karma of your activity. So what you're doing now is creating certain results that you will experience in the future. And the power of karma, the real power of karma, is that it's an evolutionary driver. So in other words, because our actions, because our brains are plastic, our brains change, and our actions have consequences, we can change our destiny. We can, up our game. We can have a moment of revelation in which we see what's holding us back and actually change it, whether through the power of awareness or through the power of activity. And because of the law of karma, which says that all actions have consequences, we're empowered to transform ourselves in the world. So, in terms of activism, in terms of all the parts of, what I would call unique self-activism, we live in this balance between what we were given, or that is what we earned in previous lives and what we earned in this life, and what we are working on. So I'm much more interested in what we're working on. I think that what makes life interesting is what you're working on. once you're not working on something, once you're not, transforming, once you're not in a growth mold, life becomes boring and starts to seem purposeless. Ask yourself, what are my unique gifts? And I'm going to ask us very specifically, what are my unique gifts that I came in with that are the result of my karmas that I've earned possibly from other lifetimes. Some of them may be gifts that you inherited from your parents, but according to the doctrine of karma, the reason that you have the parents you do is because they are the parents that will allow you to unfold your karmic situation. So what are my gifts? What are my karmic gifts? That's the first question. The second question is, and this is possibly a little bit harder, what are my karmic challenges? So what are my karmic gifts and what are my karmic challenges? I want to say this is a contemplation that is really, really helpful because it actually helps you sort out a lot of stuff. It's also something I've discovered that if you start to think about the people close to you or the people that you can't stand and to ask yourself, what is their greatness? Understanding that it is part of their unique karmic situation, and actually consider telling people what you feel is their greatness. It's, one of those huge gifts that as leaders we can offer to each other, to just get each other to look at what about them is actually truly beautiful. Once you start to recognize, okay, I am great in this way, and it could be anything, but it's a way of taking yourself out of the unworthiness spiral or the modesty, humility demand that, people, especially I find in the UK, not so much in the United States, people tend to be modest and humble it's part of the culture, at least that I've always noticed. If you can admit to yourself your greatness, and if you can admit to somebody else their greatness, it's an incredible gift to give yourself. Honestly, most of us are not quite sure what our soul is. But part of the reason I like to discuss this in terms of our uniqueness as an embodied soul, in many ways, it's easier to get this about yourself. Soul, generally speaking, feels somewhat amorphous. On the one hand, there's spirit, which is truly impersonal and evanescent. And then on the other hand, there's ego, which has many tricks, but which we're pretty used to. The unique self it's actually another word for soul, but soul expressing itself through your embodied self, even through your ego structure, but it's not your ego. And the way you know that it's not your ego is that when you're acting from unique self, you are acting without fear, without anxiety, without the need to prove something, because your unique self is part of your natural innate being, as is your greatness. Sometimes it's been cultivated, sometimes it's something you came into the world with, but you have unique greatness. Once we start to allow that greatness, to allow ourselves to identify with it, it doesn't make us arrogant. It makes us able to recognize our worth.
Sally, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
So helpful, and also sharing the power of contemplation and the power of asking these questions, and of doing this work with others as well, and what can open up in that relationship. And so thank you for your time. It's always such a joy to be together.
It is. It is.
Here are 2 mantras for Sally, honoring both Shiva and Shakti. The Shiva mantra is one that's also known as the Anusara invocation and was part of the Siddha Yoga tradition where Sally was a Swami. And this mantra is really honoring that true teacher within and everywhere, the forms of truth being consciousness and ever-present bliss, and how that is never absent, and there is always peace, and that there is always this illumination on the path of our transformation. And this mantra for the Shakti is really offering deep reverence to the goddess that abides there in all things, in the form of power and in the form of consciousness. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchidananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase. Om. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Chetana Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Durga Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Kali Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Sally Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Offered that also to Durga Kali, Lakshmi, and Sally.
It is hard to believe that we won't have the experience of sitting together in community, meditating with Sally again, or that there won't be any more conversations in this material world. One of the most beautiful aspects of this path, this yogi path, is the kula. And the kula is a cool word for community. Each of the sisters that share here, although I do want to say that the work of Sally and that the Shakti is not just for women, for those that identify as women. It is, of course, for the feminine that lives in all of us. In this case, the sisters that share here are all beautiful, beautiful souls that carry deep, deep power. And many of them are teachers that you can go and study with, go on retreats with, train with, attend workshops and rituals with. And I really do invite you to discover more about each one of these beautiful women. As I said earlier, that when Sati left her body dropped into these different parts of India, and these places became Shakti temples. They became temples to the goddess, to this divine power. Here, as Sally is traveling through the bardos, as she has left this earth, this earthly plane, the Shakti that she has awakened in each one of our hearts, it lives on inside the temple of our hearts and is there in the temple of the hearts of each of these magnificent women and teachers.
Hi, I'm Judelle, creator of Embodied Flow, Yoga and Somatics School, and a 20-year mentee, adopted spiritual daughter and student of Sally Kempton. I live between Greece and Bali and sometimes the US. What can I say about Sally Kempton? There are a few people that have the karma where their life lived is given in service so that the teachings of wisdom, of yoga, of tantra, in this case, Kashmir Shaivism, could be brought out of the chambers of ashrams or the more challenging to read books of scholars and brought to every person that was willing to receive. I met Sally Kempton probably in 2004 in Los Angeles at City Yoga. My teacher, Sue Elkind, invited her in. She had just come out of the ashram and was reintegrating into a world of her own self-sufficiency. And in that vein, in the attempt to move from being a Swami where her every need was cared for in the community of Siddha Yoga, she had to become an everyday householder. And in the joy of doing so, she created a temple out of her own small house in Carmel. And while it's not the first memory to come in mind, one most recent memory in the last year, probably in 2022, I stopped by her house in Carmel Valley where she had a sadhana practice in the morning. Every morning for several hours, she would sit in front of her own altar, a puja that had her teachers, Swami Nityananda, Swami Muktananda, the deities that were so loved as portals to energies of Durga, Saraswati, Tara, Chinnamasta, Kali, her great, great energies, ways that she crafted a sensuous relationship with life energy in the forms of the Hindu tradition, the Tantra Hindu tradition of the Mahavidyas, the goddesses. One night as I was sleeping underneath her in the bedroom, she had a bedroom downstairs and hers was upstairs. And I was woken up at about 6 a.m. by a pure energy as if sunlight had just come into the room, but it was the energy of her sadhana raining down from above, not from sound that woke me up, but just the pure field of energy that she held in herself and for thousands and thousands and thousands of people across the globe. And it poured from the floor, which was my ceiling, her floor, my ceiling, into me. And I was compelled to sit up and bathe in the magnet of her meditative field. I would come to know that she was the living example, even as I saw in the last few days articles with details of her early life as an editor and writer for magazines like Esquire and New Yorker, and her beautiful, hot, rebellious, brilliant mind, leaving the literati, the liberal, feminist, smoking hipster land of downtown New York and trading it for becoming a Swami around the age of 29, 30, and spending the next 27 years there purely for the magnet of love that she had cracked open inside of her by her teacher, Swami Muktananda. And though I never met her teacher in person, her love and dedication to pour that energy, that love, those teachings, and the lineage of teachers of Kashmir Shaivism that felt like family to her and to myself. In 2006 and 7, she led a 2-year journey for 30 beings from across the world, teaching us the Spandakartakas and Shiva Sutras. And during that time, the living, breathing essence of the sutras, of the teachings, especially around self-energy that I had not previously known, the Atma, the freedom and the fullness, words that are written about yoga, about samadhi, about meditation, but in the field of the kula, of the community that she created, helped by and facilitated by our friend and sadhana sister, Ruth Hunter. She poured everything fresh out of her 30 years of sadhana into giving us through transmission, through language, through practices, through study, through homework, through exercises that were every single day for 2 years, with retreats. And my heart melted and cracked open, in which she nursed me into the understanding of, and my possibilities expanded infinitely. And she let me know not to mistake the teachers for the teachings, so that when confusing things happened, she helped me frame it and contextualize it. And more than anything, she made a feminist by means of being a mother figure without children, but with thousands of children. Consciously, she did that. She mothered us into our spiritual lives. And for that, we'll always be grateful.
Hi, I'm Layla Sadeghi. There are so many ways to praise Sally Kempton. And one of the ways is to remark upon her cool and penetrating and very plain seeing, very laser-like intelligence. I always found that her intelligence reminded me of a couple of other writers of her generation, Joan Didion and Janet Malcolm. What's really incredible about Sally is the fact that she did something that those writers and so many people in her generation didn't do, which is that she decided to keep all of that power of her intellect and also to turn it into the opening of her heart and the cultivation of the access of the spiritual dimensions of reality. This is really an amazing thing to do. It was an amazing thing to do when she did it. It's still an amazing thing and an incredible thing for anyone to do. And the way that she did it was so powerful and so inspiring and such a great model, really, for all of us. And of course, another way to praise Sally is to talk about her incredible kind of electric, courageous badassery. I can't even imagine what it would be to live for the decades and decades in the ashram. And then after all those decades to decide to live and come to live as a householder after all of that. The fact that she was able to model for us what it is to not only live in the depths of the true spiritual heart, but how to pull that out into living in such a level of integrity and such an absolute truthful honoring of what is called for from her own integrity. I mean, this is really something special. I would also say that, as a younger spiritual aspirant and practitioner, to meet Sally is something like, what it must be like for a young comic to get to meet Carol Burnett. It's just meeting this person who's not only done the thing, but done it in the most kind of incredible and inspiring and powerful way. I feel so lucky that I got to sit with her and, hear her speak on all kinds of things spiritual, but also just sort of, shoot the breeze on popular culture and things like that. I mean, this is a person who always had something absolutely wonderful and charming and memorable to say. I could sing praise forever, but if I'm going to sing praise briefly, I want to also sing praise Sally's unbelievable availability and accessibility. So much more available and accessible really than any other teacher I've ever personally known or even really kind of heard of. She just answered the call for help every time I asked it. And I know that she did this for countless other people. And what she came with in every time I asked for help, and I really asked for help in times of great personal need, was such a level of wisdom and such a grace and such an august presence. Just such a blessing to have known her. And I offer my deepest, deepest praise to her in this moment of her great passage. And I offer my gratitude, which is boundless.
Hi, my name is Emily Kuzer. What a legend. What a legend. I've been, a bucket of tears knowing that we won't have Sally's physical presence again. During the pandemic, I wanted to see her so bad and be with her and amongst the Kula and the Sangha. I remember moments of just feeling crushed that at a time where that would have felt the best, it wasn't possible. And I really thought I'd be able to see her again. And so much has changed in these last couple of years for the globe. I was so grateful that she was online offering her courses, workshops online, just to keep people together and share and get people through these tough times. So thank you, Sally, for that. One of my favorite things about Sally, and I think if I really get down to the depths of what I learned from her, is she was open to chaos. That woman was so open and welcomed in the mess of the divine feminine, and that came in as chaos. Retreats, it was inevitably a microphone would break, a speaker would blow, a chair would bust, something would happen with the structure of the building, a schedule, or and me, when I first started to see her and go spend time with her, it was I had a pretty high level of expectations, perfectionism, ways I thought spirituality was supposed to be and a teacher was supposed to be. And I rocked up with an incredible amount of admiration for her, and had expectations of this person is going to be this perfect. And what the best thing I got from Sally is her openness to chaos. I know I just started to change after spending time with her. Like, felt like somebody like opened the release valve of like this pressure of hiding things from my background, hiding questions, deep questions I had, hiding parts of my personality. I still do these things, but definitely not to the degree I did before. Embarrassing questions about God as a woman. She was the first person to, that I asked these questions to, and felt a major paradigm shift, a big shift in my consciousness from her transmission of the feminine. Like these deep-seated, embarrassing, uncomfortable questions I had that were burning in my heart that I had to ask, that I was feeling, but I couldn't make sense of in the spiritual world as it was. She helped to feminize it. I felt more accepted as a woman. And I felt, because she was a woman and because of her background, she knew what it was like to be like a hipster, feminist, young person, had her first awakening on psychedelics, to decades as a swami in a kind of a man's world spiritually. I don't know how she did that. It's very cool that she did. Very unique experience for her generation and her time, to popping out and deciding to take the robes off and come be with people as a person without this swami identity. So all of that made me feel incredibly safe to ask questions to her. And I trusted that whatever question I might have, and however many times she might have heard that question, I felt like it was the space to go and share, to be in the energetic field, but to ask if I needed to ask, to hear questions from other people. And I was just enamored by the way she held space. And like I said, that embrace of things going wacky in retreat, or even just spending time, like with, not even in retreat, these moments outside of retreat where it's just like, to be a tantrika, just to be a person, a human walking awake, encompasses all of it. The order and the chaos was probably the best takeaway from my time with her. Loved her so much. I did have a experience, like, I was in the States for a couple of weeks. I flew into San Francisco and took a friend to Mount Madonna, which is a spiritual center in Northern California. And when we pulled in the driveway, I felt a throbbing in my head on the forefront of my brain, and my temples, some tingling on my crown. And I paused and I thought, I only feel this around one person, and it's Sally. I only feel this with her. I didn't think, I thought, oh, why would I mention this to my friend? She doesn't know Sally. She doesn't know any of these people, it's not relevant for her. But I'd said it to her. It's like, I have this sensation. I only have this around this woman, Sally. And we walked to the front door, and there was a sign at the front door, "Welcome, Sally Kempton's group." And I laughed, I laughed because, of course, this is how it works. That woman, when I was around her, it's such a transmission of Shakti. And this is always the sensation I would get, which would inevitably be like a purification. But I wrote her a text and said, I'm spontaneously here with a friend. Can we join the meditation? She said, of course, welcome, which is so her style, So thank you, Sally. Thank you so much for bringing these beautiful groups of people together. I've made the best friends, felt so embraced by this community. And I've really enjoyed like turning people on to Sally's work over the years, her books, her articles, her online teachings, her retreats, like sending people constantly towards her to like experience this rare gem of a human and her life experience. Could take the whole spiritual tradition out, and the woman is just amazing, like what she has experienced inside of herself. And I love that the people that have gone to be with her have just fallen in love with her. And her presence will be so greatly missed. Sally, we love you. We love you. Amisha, thank you for putting this podcast together in honor of Sally. And there's so much more to say. So much more to say. The words are slowly coming. Much love to all.
Thank you, Sally, for teaching me to go to the depths of my emotions. Thank you for guiding me to open up my inner world. And thank you for teaching me the roar of the goddess. With much love, Pernille Awendupai.
My name is Anja Berg. I am from Sweden. I'm a yoga teacher, movement teacher, and other things as well, but it's been my life's work. I met Sally through my studies of Tantra and Anusara Yoga in the early 2000s. Sally was a teacher in the groups that I was studying yoga and philosophy and meditation in. And I was fortunate enough to be able to study with her and to learn from my early 20s. So she has been a life companion in that way, or a pathway to maturing within the spiritual context. I will continue, as I have been, to share her. And I've always, with my students, and I always feel like there's such trust in Sally's work. There is a lack of misguidance, a lack of dominance, a lack of wanting something out of the student more than the student's actual freedom, joy, love, and wonder. Sally was an opener of love for me and for so many of us. There was a clarity and an innocence in the way that she had this power or Shakti living in her, and it was so accessible through her. Really such a gift to be near, to listen, but also to be near her and to feel that field of energy and to make that field our home too. I had a experience in one of her meditation retreats of how the universal, or how Shakti, how life was looking through me at the world, at everything in the world. And it was pure love, just pure love. That experience is something that I will treasure for my life. Thank you, Sally. But more than those more extraordinary experiences, even though they are amazing and shape us and shape what we think imaginable and feel and know to be possible, is just being with somebody where you sort of guess that they dwell there often and how that impacts us on a cellular level. And Sally had a real impact on thousands and thousands of humans. And I think we are all just so grateful right now. Thank you, Sally. I love you. And wherever you are, I hope that you are well. Enjoy the freedom.
My name's Charlotte Gallagher. I'm a yoga teacher and actress and general human. And I just want to say, Sally, thank you so much for leading me to the cave of my heart.
This is Patty from Malibu, California. I'm so grateful to Sally for ultimately transmitting the presence of God to me and allowing me greater intimacy with my own heart. I know she did that for so many others, and also for being such an amazing teacher. Just the clarity of her wisdom, which she conveyed with so much humor and humility. I always felt like even though Sally was so wise, she had so much love and appreciation for me and all of her students. And I love her as well and will miss her dearly.
This is Susanna Harwood Rubin. What I think about Sally Kempton is quite a few years back, I had just returned from one of my many trips to Chidambaram to spend time in the great temples of Nataraja and of Tilaikalayaman. Abhaya Yoga in Brooklyn, place where I sometimes taught at that time, was hosting Sally, as they did fairly frequently.
And I sat with her. She directed a series of meditations. And in this moment, I was buzzing with so much energy from the temple. I was back in New York, loving my life, but also longing for that deep connection that I had to these two places and the energy, the Shakti, that was such a huge part of my life. So I went to Sally and she directed us through these spectacular meditations, as she always did. They were so powerful that I felt like I was back in the temple. And at the very end, I felt like I didn't know how to express my gratitude to her for bringing me back to these places of my heart, for bringing me back to my heart. And so I reached into my bag and grabbed this huge little fold of kumkum, just a mound of it, a mass of it, wrapped in Tamil newspaper and spilling out and stained red and orange and staining everything it touched. And it was from Talai Kali temple, from Darshan with Kali, and had been on Kali's body. And I went up and waited, just as everyone did. And I said to her, I just wanted to thank you. I'm just back from Chidambaram, and I wanted to give you this. It was I didn't know how to thank her. And so I just handed her this kumkum and I said, it's from Talai Kali. It was on her body. She was so gracious. I felt like everybody must give this to her all the time, but she was so gracious. She said to me, oh, this is incredible. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to give this to me? And I said, yes, all I want to do is give this to you. And she looked at me and she said, I see her light shining in you and through you. We just had this moment and I can't explain it. It was just a moment of such deep connection about something we both loved so much. It was my only way. And that moment of overwhelm, of thanking her because of all that she had given me through the years, having studied with her many times, having read her books over and over again. And this time was right after Awakening Shakti had come out. And the Shakti was alive in her and was alive in me through the temple. And she recognized that. I cannot express how much she meant to me. Her books, her meditations, the absolute clarity and simplicity with which she taught all of us, which was a real accomplishment, demonstrating her abilities of a journalist, which of course is how she started. That her teaching, it seemed like she would just drop a couple of words, and there are very few meditation teachers and philosophy teachers who can do this so powerfully, but just a few words and a few images, and you suddenly discovered you were deep, deep, deep inside your heart in a way that you hadn't previously imagined. And I'm so grateful for her being such a magnificent person in my life and in all of our lives. And my heart is bruised at her loss, but absolutely full. If we can all chant the Mrityunjaya mantra and in her honor and hold her in our hearts, she will continue to be completely alive, that Shakti that lives within all of us. Om Namah Shivaya. And thank you, Sally.
My name is Anne van der Wal. I live in France, and I've had the blessing, I feel, to sit with Sally Kempton for the past 10 years, mostly in Assisi, Italy, where she was leading retreats with our friend Andrea Boni. Those were absolute magical times. And the last time I saw Sally was there in 2019, and she was leading a retreat on the path of life and death. And that was a really profound week, and even on that very deep subject, she brought that sweet, gentle, light way of opening us to those teachings and those practices. And I felt she was really preparing us and she was initiating us, and she made it very clear that she was doing so. And I feel now that she is in this portal between life and death. in those days, that she's calling us in the same way that she was opening up a space for us when we were sitting with her to meditate, that her sheer presence and the energy she was holding allowed us to connect to that deeper space. She's also, through her passing, she's also inviting us through herself into that space. And I feel her presence very, very deeply in a very sweet and gentle way.
Shri Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Durga Ma, Shri Ma, Jai Ma, Sally Kempton, Jai Ma, Jai Sally Ma. Om Rim Shrim. Om Rim Shrim. Om Rim Shrim. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Blessings, blessings, everyone, in this beautiful tribute to Sally Kempton. Hello, I'm Sianna Sherman, and I have been a friend of this great luminous being for the last 3 decades. As her student, as a friend, as someone who had the very amazing honor of collaborating with Sally throughout the world for the past couple decades. I'm so filled with gratitude, with praise for Sally Kempton. Sally, I love you with all my heart. I bow to you. I make the deepest offerings and blessings to you. Rest in great peace, beloved teacher, mentor, and friend. I am going to miss you so much. And I celebrate your life. I praise your life. I love you with all my heart through every realm, into every galaxy. You are this great Shakti force that blessed this earth and now flying through the realms. I praise your name. I sing your name. I will always and in all ways praise your life and all the ways that you have uplifted so many of us and broken our hearts wide open with the living Shakti wisdom that pours through your eternal lotus being. I met you in a doorway. I met you in a threshold, a new beginning. I met you as Swami Durgananda shortly after one of my first experiences with Durga Shakti Ma in India. When I first met and had the experience of Durga in India, something like a lightning bolt, the lightning power of the Shakti awakened inside of me. It blasted through me. It nearly wiped me out, and I think it did. And then I met you in this threshold, your gaze, the feeling of your power and of your presence, of your fierce and gentle compassion and love, all at once blasted me open and entirely hugged me and loved me into my being and everything I'm becoming. The journey with you over these past few decades is one of the most enormous gifts of my life. And I thank you with all my heart. You are sublime, you are infinite, and you are supreme. You are awakening Shakti through eternity. The last mantras that we chanted together a few months ago in the Power of Meditation Summit were these opening mantras that I chanted. with the bija, the great bija, sounds of Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim. Om, Aim, Hrim, Shrim. And I keep chanting these in praise of your life and all you have shared. I'm chanting with you every day as you travel with the angels, the guardians, the guides, the rishis, the sages, the seers, and the siddhas. I know you are in great company, and everywhere that you have ever gone and offered your blessings has inspired great company to gather. Rest in great peace and know that your life has forever changed, amplified, and uplifted infinite lives here upon this great earth. I'd like to share some of the essential teachings that there are so many. I've been going through notebooks and journals filled with teachings with Sally and on the computer, and so many amazing webinars that we've been in together and interviews that Sally has generously poured her teachings for the Rasa Yoga School and for the Priestess Mystery School, and all the ways that Sally can inspire very profound depth of living wisdom that at the same time, while it has so much profundity in the depth and the gravitas, is completely light and free and buoyant in its being. And so I have been going through my notes and remembrances over these past few days, and altars are everywhere and candles lit everywhere, and just really remembering and grieving and praising and grief and praise for Sally Kempton. So here are a few of these beloved teachings that I'd like to share with all of you. This is on the power of Shakti. This was from a winter solstice retreat that Sally and I shared and offered together in Berkeley, California. This one's from 2013. Shakti is the essential juiciness, the essential eros of the world that injects love into our lives. The yearning for more is exactly what compels the Shakti forward into manifestation. I'm going to just pause right here. Shakti is the essential juiciness, the essential eros of the world that injects love into our lives. Thank you. Shakti worship is turning yourself to the hidden powers of your psyche. The one who worships Shakti, both spiritual liberation and worldly fulfillment, sits in the palm of your hand. This is the power in you that allows you to know your greatness on every level, to really know your own capacity for liberation. Invoke the power of transformation, the rhythmic power of life, and Kundalini, the evolutionary power of life itself. The more we recognize this, the more it shifts us in our daily life. Oh, beautiful form of the goddess, known as Sri Lalita Tripura Sundari, she who is the play of the cosmos, she who is the play of consciousness, the play of the universe, the play of everything, she who is this enormous beauty of the great three cities. Oh, Sri Lalita Tripura Sundari, she lives in all of us. She lives in every being as the evolutionary force of the Kundalini Shakti at the base of our spine being kindled into awakening and for our own capacity of bliss. This rolling, ecstatic heart of the impulse of life itself is the Kundalini Shakti. Just take a moment. I have so much deep feeling. Thank you, Amisha, for bringing this podcast together and into the world. And I know Sally loved this podcast so much and has appeared in the tapestry of the offering of this podcast many times. You know, Sally is a great lover of Tantra, and how I first came to her all those many blessed years ago. That the power of Tantra is the power of weaving the tapestry. like really weaving the tapestry of our lives, of our stories, of the mythos, of the meaning, of the beauty, of the magic, of the depth of our journey, of the challenges and the difficulties and all the things that we encounter. And that Sally has always opened up the portal of wounds into wisdom, of embracing every single part of the journey, and that becomes the compost of liberatory power and also of bliss consciousness. Sally, you lived your life here on earth in a way of a deep well of wisdom, always, meeting each of us like right where we are. I've been with you in my life in some of the most extreme times of challenge and pain. And always, and then I've been with you in times of extreme jubilance and joy and the feeling of just so much victory. But every single time that I have been with you, you just welcome fully. There's no agenda. It's like, okay, here we are. Let's meet. We're meeting in this doorway in this moment. Here's how it feels. Here's how it looks. And we are going to go for it in the inner triumphant spirit of what is possible in this moment. And that is what I've always experienced with you, a full and generous welcoming with a deep, compelling, and totally steadfast dedication to the power of evolutionary consciousness and transformation, and also the power to fully love ourselves in the being and the becoming that we are. Thank you for this radical love. Thank you for your radical wisdom. Thank you for your radical empowerment. Thank you for your radical transmission. Thank you. I will just share a couple more teachings that I've been reflecting on in these last few days. This is on the process of becoming and really of the power of our beingness and our becoming. Most of our life is in the realm of becoming. But in the process of awakening and transformation, we learn to dip into being over and over again, and to be grounded in the body and allow the sense of being to infuse our becoming. This is the transformative process. Constantly in the process of being and becoming. What causes the transformation is the being infused into the becoming. Thank you. Our personal transformation is the evolution of consciousness. And this is our wake-up call to really do something with our character. Invoke the power of transformation, the rhythmic power of life, the kundalini, the evolutionary power of life itself. The more we recognize the kundalini and this evolutionary power, the more it shifts us in our life. All blessings. Great friend, great guru of the heart, great flowing river of living wisdom, of sublime wisdom, of everyday practical transparency and everyday kind of practical facing life, and with humor and with depth, to meet each moment, no matter what it is, yoking our full presence and together in community. Sally, you inspired so much in the way of the gathering of hearts and minds and bodies in community, in Sangha, in Kula, all over the world. Your legacy is immeasurable, it's endless, it's profound. Blessings to all of your ancestors, blessings to all of your teachers, blessings to all of your guides and the siddhas and the powers that have escorted you and as the power of grace itself. And now you as an ancestor for all of us and helping us to propel ourselves forward in the way of transformational awakening and for the future generations. May you be fully luminous and free and your wings expanding through all eternity. I love you. Thank you. Namastasye, 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 namo, namaha. Maha Mrityunjaya mantra. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Udvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshya Mamritat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Udvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshya Mamritat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardanam Udvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityormukshya Mamritat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Great blessings to you, Luminous One. Jai Ma Durga. Jai Ma Kundalini Ma. Jai Ma Kundalini Shakti Ma. Jai Ma Sally Kempton Ma.
This just leaves me to thank everyone that has been part of this episode, that has shared their words, shared their transmissions, and of course to our dearest Sally Kempton. I want to also thank and honour Mary Chan, our sound editor, who has put in extra hours to help us to make this episode, which of course has involved weaving many different parts together and in a really short time frame. And so a deep honouring of Mary Chan for what she brings, and also to Annegret Folderbach and the incredible team that we have that is the vehicle through which everyone's wisdom that comes on this podcast gets shared. Please do dive deeper into Sally's teachings, read her books, listen to her audiobooks, take her teleclasses, and receive this incredible transmissive energy. You can find in the show notes links to everyone that has shared in this episode, to other episodes where Sally is, and of course to her website, which is sallykempton.com. Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.